So we're looking for the rate of return on a 10-year bond that begins in year 5. Let's look at a time chart to see what we already have. So here we have a time chart and we have years 0 through 15 on the bottom. In this first table that we're given in the question, it tells us that we have a maturity date on the left-hand column and a long rate. This R sub n means it's a long rate, which means it's an average rate over the past X amount of years, whether X is 3, 7, 12, or 15. So this first thing we have, it says that the average rate over the first 3 years is 4.10%. So that's the average rate in this interval right here, from from period 0 to period 3. And the second thing, the second entry tells us over the first 7 years, the average rate is 4.7%. So that accounts for that whole interval. That's the average rate over that whole interval of time. The third entry tells us it's 4.6% between years 0 and 12. And finally, we know that the average rate over the whole interval from 0 to 15 is 4.4%. And so we also are told 2 more pieces of information, that the actual rates, the spot rates themselves, between years 5 and year 6, and year 6 and year 7, is this 5.5%. And so the average rate between those two is 5.5% as well. We know from year 5 to year 7, you'll earn 5.5% per year. Now we're looking for a bond that has this time frame. It starts in period 5, which is the 6th year, because the year starting in 0 is the first year, so it goes up to year 1. And the question tells us the bond starts in year 5 because it's over the 6th year. Again, that 6th year begins in year 5. So we need to know the interest from this time period all the way to time period 15, because that's when the bond ends. And we're going to use this information that's given to find all those interest rates. So we have the rates for years 5 through 7, and we need some way to get the years 7 through 15, because again, this is given in the question, and we need the rest. We need from 7 on. If we have from 7 on, we can interpolate and we can use the information to find the present value of this bond. Well, so what is the rate between year 7 and year 15? Well, notice we have the rate starting from 0 and going up to 7. We also have the rate starting from 0 and going all the way to 15. We're looking for this chunk right here, this chunk in between, and because of pure expectations, we can actually punch it out and use the average of this rate right here, and we can imply what the rate would be right here, so that getting a bond from 0 to 7 and then getting a bond from 7 to 15 will give us the same total return as would be getting a bond from 0 to 15. That's exactly the strategy we're going to use to find what that forward rate is, the average rate every year from 7 to 15 is in that chunk of space. So again, by pure expectations, the 15-year bond will yield the same total return as a 7-year bond followed by an 8-year bond that begins in year 7. So we must first find the total return earned over 15 years using the 15-year long rate, which we were given in the original equation. That's the 4.4%. So first let's find the total amount of return that's earned over all 15 years using the 15-year long rate. So it's 4.4% per year times the 15 years gives us a total return of 66%. And that's this entire amount. That's the total amount earned. Now we can find how much return a 7-year bond would earn over its life, because again, we have the 4.7%. So we're going to do the same thing. The total return earned from years 1 to 7 is the 4.7% times the 7% times the 7 years in which that bond exists, and that's a total return of 32.9%. And so that goes right here. The difference is the amount of return earned in years 7 through 15. Again, we can do this because of pure expectations. So the return earned between 7 and 15 is equal to the return earned between 1 and 15 minus the return earned between 1 and 7. So it's the 66% minus the 32.9%. That gives us a total return of 33.10%. That goes right here. And that's the rate that we were looking for. That's the missing chunk. So now we have all the information we need to evaluate our 10-year bond. So again, by pure expectations, the return on a 10-year security that starts in year 5, which is what we're looking for, that's what the question is asking, is the same as the return on a 2-year security that starts in year 5, which we know the rate for because it's a 5.5%, it's given to us, followed by an 8-year security that starts in year 7. And we know the total return earned by that security because we just found it. It's 33.10%. So the return from 5 to 15 is equal to the return from 5 to 7 plus the return from 7 to 15. The return from 5 to 7, remember this 5.5% was earned in both years, so it's the 5.5% earned over the 6th year from 5 to 6 and earned over the 7th year from 6 to 7. So it's 2 times the 5.5% plus the total return earned from 7 to 15, which is this 33.10%. So we add the 33.10%. That gives us a total return from 5 to 15 equal to 44.1%. And that's this area right here. Since we're looking for the annual rate, the answer is this 44.1% earned over 10 years, so we divide it by 10. That gives us an annual rate of 4.41%.